Welcome to NewYorkBIO's virtual breakfast series, a digital program created in 2020, bringing you fireside chats with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features Nancy Thornberry, CEO of Calliope, a New York City startup focused on the gut-brain axis.
And we can kick off.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hawksland, and welcome to our Tuesday morning breakfast series for New York Bio. We have a fantastic guest today, Nancy Thornberry. But as usual, I'll give you a little update. New York City has entered phase 4 of the reopening plan, which means pretty much everything except the indoor dining and activities that I know a lot of people are waiting for. But we're going to continue to be safe, and you can eat outdoor in the 95-degree heat if you want to in Manhattan. One thing of note is thank you to Goodwin Procter, the law firm, for being the sponsor of our breakfast series. It's very much appreciated that they support the work we're doing. And one other piece of information for you all. So as many of you know who've been engaged with New York Bio, we originally had our annual meeting scheduled for March 10th. We clearly had to pull the plug on that about 48 hours in advance. So we are reimagining, I feel like that is the buzzword for 2020. We are reimagining our annual meeting and moving it virtual. This year, we're moving to a virtual format on September 15th and 16th, so 2 morning sessions. So we'll still bring you the great content, and then we'll be having some evening networking events virtually as well. Even though we really wish we could be in person, it's just not responsible. So we're going all virtual, and we hope you'll register on our website. With that, that's all I have this morning, except for one reminder. Those of you who are frequent viewers of our Tuesday morning breakfast know you can ask questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Derek and I will be monitoring those throughout our conversation with Nancy, and we'll try to get those as we can. So Derek, I will kick it over to you to introduce Nancy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Nancy, it is fantastic to have you here. One other thing, we are working on getting all of the previous episodes of the virtual breakfast series on our website and onto our newly launching YouTube channel. So stay tuned for those. We'll let everybody know when those launch. So if you missed one, you can go back and see all of them. So it is our pleasure to have Nancy Thornberry, CEO of Calliope, here with us this morning. Nancy, if you want to give everybody just kind of 3 seconds on who you are and where you came from.
Sure. I am currently CEO of Calliope. Calliope is a company that's almost 5 years old. Prior to joining Calliope, I spent my career at Merck, most recently as the franchise head for diabetes and endocrinology, and decided to make the leap to biotech, as I said, when we launched the company in 2015.
Awesome. So Calliope is probably, one of the, I would say, one of the biggest startup announcements that New York City has seen in the last few years. There was kind of a wave of companies in that time frame that all got kind of larger Series A's, and that was certainly one of the biggest ones. You had 3 big names out of Columbia, you had Lux coming behind it, and you came really early. And what were some of the big things that kind of drew you to this? Because you obviously had this big position at Merck, and what are the kind of things at that time? Because there weren't that many other big things established in New York at that time. You were really on kind of the bleeding edge of this next wave of startups that came out. What were some of the things that drew you to Calliope, and kind of why then, and why that company?
Sure. Yes. So when I decided to leave Merck, I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn about biotech, but I was not interested at that time in an operational role. Mm-hmm. And I would look at some companies periodically, but nothing really caught my imagination. And then I met with Adam Goldburn at Lux a little over 5 years ago. And he told me about this company, and I said, I'm really not interested in an operational role. But then we talked about it a little bit more. I met with Charles Zucker from Columbia, one of the founders, and then I kind of fell in love. I would say that the things that really drew me to this company there were several reasons. First, Just the subject matter I thought was absolutely fascinating. We work on the gut-brain axis, which is the bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain. And I felt this was a pretty untapped area for drug discovery, just because there was so little known of the signaling pathways between the gut and the brain. So I thought it was a fundamentally new approach and a new opportunity. The opportunities in terms of disease areas are very broad. There are multiple diseases linked to the gut-brain axis or associated, including diseases of metabolism, CNS disorders, immunology, inflammation, GI disorders. So the opportunity was large. And the people involved were fantastic. So as probably everyone on this call knows, it's ultimately all about the team. And as you mentioned, Lux was involved in really founding this company, and they had brought together just a fantastic team of investors and the founding scientists, the initial scientists in the company. There were, I think, 6 people here when I joined. I think I was employee number 6. Were fantastic. So it checked every box for me in terms of the area, the opportunity to do something impactful, the people involved, and then finally being in New York City was an additional draw. Although I must say I would have moved for this company.
You would have moved virtually anywhere for this one, right? So so can you kind of encapsulate a little bit more about how big of a shift this type of targeting is? Because I remember, so when we first met, it was, early days of Calliope. It was like a Friday afternoon happy hour with 4 people in Alexandria somewhere. I think it was the accelerator guys. And, the first thing you literally said, we started talking a bit about Calliope, and you started to say, at Merck, we looked for things that, didn't get just, we looked for things that had a completely different, bioavailability profile. And now we don't need that, and we can flip it. Right. So how big of a shift is that really in terms of thinking about drug discovery and thinking about different things you can do therapeutically?
Sure. So before I answer that, let me just step back a bit and describe just a little bit more about what we're doing. I should mention the gut-brain axis had been known for centuries, and it was known to be important in multiple diseases. But as I said, there really wasn't an intimate understanding of the signaling pathways, the molecular pathways involved. And that's largely because the technologies did not exist in order to study it. And so that really is what Calliope is about. It's about applying new technologies, many of them only developed in the last 5 or 10 years, and using those to build a comprehensive map of gut-brain circuits, both neural circuits and hormonal circuits. And then once we understand those circuits, to target them with gut-restricted molecules. So target them at their origin with, to your point, molecules that never or only have very minimal systemic absorption. And so that was an incredibly intriguing concept for me because it automatically suggested that we would have a higher degree of safety, both preclinically and clinically with our molecules. And we felt that was going to be a huge edge for us. And in fact, it has turned out with the programs that we have that so far, the preclinical safety has been really, really good. And we anticipate that this is going to translate into an overall higher probability of success for our programs. I should mention, we are not the first to think about gut restriction. There are examples of gut-restricted therapeutics. And I think this is an area that's becoming increasingly interesting given how exciting the gut-brain axis and the gut itself has become as a new area of therapeutic focus. But we are, I'm always challenging our chemists to really own this space because I think it is a really promising space for a whole new generation of new modalities.
So you've mentioned tools and technologies a couple of times. I don't know if people really have a good appreciation of just how much kind of sequencing and other things that you guys do. You've had an incredibly built out technical team at the company. So can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe kind of the integration of sequencing and that sort of technology into a bona fide discovery company?
Yes. So we're very proud of our platform. And you're right, it was incredibly challenging to build it and required people with very specific expertise. So essentially, our platform is a platform of many integrated technologies, several that were discovered for the study of systems neuroscience. And in fact, it was the vision of the founders that one could take technologies that had been or generated for the discovery of circuits in the brain and apply those to the discovery of circuits in the gut-brain axis. So that was the original concept. So our technology platform is composed of single-cell sequencing, which is foundational to what we do. We now understand what all of the specialized cell types are in the gut and in all other components of the gut-brain axis. That includes the enteric nervous system, the immune cells in the gut, the vagus nerve, the nucleus of the solitary tract. And we're building that, we've built that not only in mouse, but we're also building the analogous single cell atlas in human. But then it's very important to contextualize that information. And for that, we use various circuit mapping technologies. So anatomical circuit tracing that allows us to understand which cells are communicating with, for example, which cells in the vagus are communicating with which cells in the brain. We use optogenetics and chemogenetics to understand what the functions of those cells are. So we can activate individual cell types with light or with a designer ligand in order to understand what physiology that cell is actually mediating. Organoids are central to our platform. They're really mini guts in a test tube. And we use those to understand the potential for translation for our mechanisms. And then we have a human genetics platform that we're just getting off the ground that we're very excited about. So it's really this integrated platform that enables us not only to discover new biology, but also to translate biology from academia and elsewhere, since there's so much focus in this space. And then also very importantly to just enable our programs. So as I mentioned, the gut restriction technology, the organoid technology, these are all things that should increase the probability of success of translation, which is super important given that we are early stage. And I think many of the people on the call understand the attrition in the early space. So that was a big focus and a big draw for me.
Yep. How much of the early stuff has, mapped pretty close to the vision?
Well, it's really remarkable. I went through this exercise a couple of years ago, and periodically I look at the original concept for the company. And I would say what we're doing is very true to the vision of the company. I would say we have implemented additional technologies that weren't initially anticipated, and many data sets that we didn't initially have on our radar. But the concept of targeting hormonal and vagal circuits with gut restricted molecules is still central to our strategy.
Nancy, obviously, as you've developed technology and become, I guess, more aware of the variety of therapeutic conditions, right, that may be addressed by the work you're doing, how did Calliope decide to narrow down? Where did you decide to go first, and how did you get there?
Right, it's an excellent question. So although I was new to biotech, I think I was, well, I knew it was going to be important to get some programs off the ground relatively quickly. And so for that reason, I had some ideas even prior to coming into the company as to potential biology that would be enabled by the platform. And so our initial program is target satiety circuits for the treatment of obesity. Because it was an understanding at a single cell level of exactly where satiety hormones are located in the gut, what receptors are co-localized with them, what regions of the gut are important, that really helped us think about approaching obesity in a fundamentally new way. And so that is our initial program. But back to the point I made earlier about attrition in early stage drug discovery, we did not want to be a metabolism company, and it was very important to diversify the portfolio and de-risk our programs. And so that has been front and center in our strategy to build the portfolio. So we are actually working in multiple disease areas. Our second program targets barrier function for the treatment of inflammatory bowel disease. And we have programs behind that, rare disease play, and then of course, central nervous system disorders are of high interest to us, and we have some very promising data there as well. So despite the challenges in working in multiple disease areas, these are all areas, programs that are highly enabled by our platform. And so that's where the synergy really comes in. And it allows us to, advance multiple programs in parallel. We're excited because our first program on targeting satiety circuits for obesity should go into the clinic this year.
That's amazing.
That's exceptional. That's really exciting. So when you're thinking about this and when you're building the company, did you have any kind of big overarching, lessons from your career at Merck that you said, when I do this company, I'm going to do this, this, and this? Did you have anything that, kind of stood out and said, I want to build a company this way?
Yes. So I would say that working in a big pharma company, I was very lucky at Merck. Well, first of all, Merck was a fantastic place to work, and my colleagues there were really second to none. So it was just a fantastic experience. I also had the rare privilege of being associated with a program from its inception through clinical development, commercialization, and lifecycle management, the Januvia program, and that really gave me this end-to-end perspective, which was really important in framing my thoughts about this company. One thing I learned in being in drug discovery for so long is humility. Drug discovery is really hard, and early stage in particular. And so something we try to embed in the culture here is the need to fully leverage the talent around you. Any success I've had in my career is the result of working with amazing people who knew far more than I did about particular topics. And so if I do anything well, it's really kind of bringing amazing people together to work towards a common goal. So that is really fundamental to our culture and something that I wanted to really embed in our thinking here. Obviously, hand in hand with that is teamwork and collaboration. And so that also, again, everyone on the call knows, for any successes in life, it requires, or for most of them, it requires great teamwork and collaboration. So that's also something that Merck did incredibly well. And in fact, it was extremely important when we started this company to bring some people from pharma in early. We had just amazing scientists from academia who had deep expertise in our core technology areas and in the areas of science in which we were working. But it really was important to bring in people who had not only drug discovery experience, but that brought with them this culture of teamwork and collaboration that's so embedded in the DNA of a pharma company. So that's something we've really focused on as well. On the flip side, in terms of things that I definitely did not want to reproduce, obviously too many meetings, too much bureaucracy. I just felt we wanted to be kind of a little as nimble as we possibly could be without too much overhead and onerous decision making.
No multiple PowerPoints a day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's underappreciated in some senses where people could say, I want to do all of these things. I also don't want to do this, or this ever again. Nope. So, and it's interesting that you bring up teamwork and things, because as you said before, you're going after multiple indications, and you now have to, you kind of need to build the team that can go after a lot of things at once, rather than building if you will, a standalone, diabetes company where everybody is a dyed-in-the-wool endocrinologist. You now have, people that have put together all of these pieces of technologies and are going after a number of different disease areas. So, it's easy to write down on paper and say, well, this is what our portfolio looks like, and have somebody say, oh, there's all these things, and that's all really interesting. But, it's also hard for some people to consider that if you have all of these things, you can't have your company be staffed with experts on all of them. You have to kind of make some bets on where you're going to, kind of go deeper on your expertise.
No question. And as I mentioned earlier, we didn't want to be niched into a particular therapeutic area. We really want to be recognized as a premier gut-brain access company. And to your point, given that it touches so many disease areas, this is where fully leveraging the world around us is so important. Leveraging partnerships. We have strong relationships with subject matter experts in a number of different disease areas. I would say that's another benefit of working at a place like Merck, where you are able to kind of build very broad networks and have many touch points in different disease areas. So that's been extremely helpful. But you're right, a company of 65 people working on multiple disease areas, you really have to think about partnerships, and you have to leverage the external world.
Yeah,
I am very excited that we recently hired somebody to help to lead our immunology and inflammation efforts. And we hired him from Seattle virtually during a pandemic. So we're very proud of that hire.
That's exciting.
I actually was going to ask about that. So you started with, you were number 6, right? And now you have 65 and you're recruiting all over the country. So one thing that we get asked a lot, obviously, as New York Bio and supporting the New York ecosystem of biotech companies is it hard to recruit for a company that's based in New York, sort of we'll call it the non-traditional hubs of, right, Boston, Cambridge, and California?
Well, to the contrary, when I'm asked about the advantages of being in New York City, I would say that recruiting is a huge edge because it's an untapped talent pool. And we have proximity to the New Jersey Pharma Corridor, obviously all of the amazing academic institutions within New York City. So for the most part, I think it would be extremely challenging to recruit our team elsewhere. They're incredible, and it's an amazing group of people. The other real benefit to being here is just stability. So the turnover in Cambridge and San Francisco for many of the biotechs, I think, exceeds 20% per year, which is really, really challenging as a CEO in terms of business continuity to have that kind of turnover. So we're very fortunate that we do not see that here. If I were to say which, where there have been some challenges, it is in bringing perhaps, a head of a therapeutic area as the one we just recruited, with families to this area when they're not familiar with the New York metropolitan area. But person we just hired is absolutely awesome, and was game to do this, and has several young kids, and so we're just couldn't be more excited. It just took a little more work.
Well, I'm always available to show them around Westchester.
Is that a formal New York Bio benefit? Do we offer that for do we offer that as part of our services? Okay, so we had a question from Lori Dernovich about she said you are a master fundraiser and asked for some of your secrets. And this is kind of a good gateway to a couple of other things on the financial side. Do you have, so we can start with what are some of the secrets that you have from a fundraising standpoint?
So hi, Lori. I'm a huge Lori Dernovich fan. For those of you who don't know her, you should check her out. So we've been very fortunate. I think we've raised about 240 million, and very fortunate to have completed our Series C raise in March, actually just before COVID hit. So that was terrific. So again, I would make 2 points about fundraising. First, again, back to leveraging the talent around you. This is obviously something I knew nothing about coming into this job. But I'm a big fan of not just kind of trying to learn it myself, but rather, reaching out, networking, and finding out what has been successful for others. And so that, so I did a lot of that prior to the Series B raise. Our investors are awesome, and they have been extremely helpful in making the connections to investors who kind of share the vision for Calliope. So they were just very helpful in getting us where we are today in terms of fundraising.
How did you add Bill Gates?
Yes. So yes, so he's a personal investor in the company. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. It was a Saturday morning, and Josh Wolf, I got an email from Josh Wolf, and it said, "Hi, Bill, meet Nancy," or something like that. And I'm like, who is this? And I looked in the email. I said, "Whoa, well, this is cool." My kids were like very impressed. And subsequent to that, I met a few people on his team, and that resulted in a meeting here in New York City a couple of years ago, where I told him the story. And interestingly, I was with obesity as our lead program. I wasn't sure how he would react to that, given that he, works in the developing world. And actually, that's the program that really grabbed him, because, as he said, overnutrition is now globally a bigger problem than undernutrition. And so he was very excited about what we were doing and decided to invest. So it's been terrific to have their support.
Okay, he came in the next round too, which I think is another nice kind of optical thing where everybody continues to be on board. So with the round that you just closed, where is that going to take the company? You said your satiety lead is going to actually go into the clinic this year, and what are some of the other? What is the pipeline going to look like in a year? Right. How is the company going to change? What's this going to look like?
Yep. So as I said, we very deliberately have built a de-risk portfolio. I should mention that we're really not interested in doing anything incremental, and we are working on big problems. And that was very important to me when I came into the company. These are areas of huge unmet need where we feel there's just a lot of opportunity to have an impact on human health. So the lead program that will go into the clinic this year, we anticipate the second program targeting IBD will enter the clinic next year.
Okay.
And then behind it, we have 5 or 6 earlier stage programs that, as I said, one targets a rare disease. We have another interesting play in GI motility. And then we're extremely excited about our approach to target the vagal nerve, what we call an oral approach to vagal nerve stimulation. And there we're looking at neuroimmunology and CNS disorders.
Yeah. So hand in hand with trying to not be incremental is really kind of the unknown in terms of human physiology, right? So have you had discussions with your investors on what these programs look like, what kind of reach you're actually looking for here, and are they generally comfortable with kind of the profile of going off into the unknown therapeutically in terms of not having either precedent programs or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that we've thought very hard about everything we can do to de-risk and increase the probability of success of our programs. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the organoid technology, we have our gut-restricted chemistry, but not only that, there are many, for example, in our lead program, satiety hormones have been well known for some time, and they've been well validated as well. And there are many injectable therapeutics that leverage some of these hormones. And so the program, we know enough about the biology, and with our platform have learned so much more that we just feel that program has a very high probability of success. And obesity being I believe it is the #1 underlying contributor to the direct costs in the healthcare system. We feel that this is a really important area for not only Calliope, but other members of the biotech and pharma communities to begin to address again in a very serious way. And if anything, I think COVID has highlighted the importance of going after these chronic diseases that are serious issues for so many people in our population, and who now have been established to be clear comorbidities for serious infection and death from COVID.
Because it's so broad, do you have insights into what types of patients you believe are, kind of best to either receive the therapies you're thinking about? I mean, it's such an enormously broad condition. Do you, are you able to kind of pinpoint the types of profiles early on, or is it something where is it something that's almost too big to tackle in terms of what's truly important in patient selection?
Well, I would say the science has not evolved in the obesity field such that precision medicine is really an option.
Yeah.
But as you say, more, it afflicts, I think, close to 50% of the population. And so it's just a very broad opportunity. I would say one particular, I guess, subpopulation that's particularly interesting to us is those individuals who have type 2 diabetes and obesity. 90% of type 2s are obese, and our approach is anticipated not only to have very robust effects on body weight loss, we're targeting 10+%, but also we're anticipating very good effects on glycemic control. So that would be a population that would make sense for us.
Sure.
You're looking to work with both primary care and endocrinology.
Correct.
Yeah. So we have a question from John Cunningham, which I think is a great transition here. And he says, "Hey, it's great to see you. And how do you feel about being back in the office during this stage of the pandemic?"
I'm very happy to be back in the office. And hello, John, and he knows how grateful I am to his colleagues, himself, for helping us get our employees safely back. So we were shut down for 3 weeks, and then we decided to, on a voluntary basis, ask our employees to come back, but I would say, took baby steps. So I think the first week we had 2 people come back. The next week we had 4 volunteers, and that ultimately resulted in everyone volunteering, all of our lab-based employees volunteering to return to work. So safety of our employees is absolutely paramount, and we found that if we kept that kind of front and center, that we could create a very safe environment here. And the people at Alexandria have done a fantastic job. For those of you who work here, aren't yet back, it's extremely safe. They've done everything they can to ensure the safety of the employees here. And so now we are on a shift schedule, just because with social distancing, we can't have everybody back in the lab at one time. But I would say every couple of weeks, we're implementing kind of new guidelines that either further increase the safety or enable us to, have even more people back at one time. So far, so good. It's gone very well, and the productivity during this time has actually been terrific.
From just a tactical standpoint, did you have to do things like either, prioritize experiments or list things or schedule out, exactly what could get done when?
Yes, and again, back to the whole teamwork and collaboration. I'm always looking, or we are always looking, for silver linings from this experience. Certainly, the time spent working from home enabled us to dig more deeply into some of our data, think really carefully about our experiments, think very carefully about prioritization experiments, such that when people came back, the highest priority experiments were getting done. I think that's why we were able to maintain the productivity during this time. And also just job sharing. So even now when we're on a shift schedule, you know, it's not ideal, obviously, for research continuity purposes, but people are, you know, passing off some of the experiments that often wasn't done before, and it increases the communication and teamwork between our employees. So that's been terrific as well. And I have to say, our employees just have been incredibly tenacious, I would say, and motivated to keep things going really well here at Calliope. We even had our employees, one of our employees volunteering just to drive people here when it was early days. And,
Wow.
and I think he was driving all over Manhattan, bringing some people in. So it's been really challenging, but positive experience.
So how did you feel in the beginning when, you know, when it was only, I imagine it was only the people that were actually going to be running the experiments that were allowed in the building? You know, how does that impact, you know, you? Were you allowed in the building at the very beginning? You know, how did you balance the ability to either be in the building or not be in the building, right? Because it's very difficult to have, you know, the team there doing things and you as the head of the company either able or not able to get in.
Right. So technically, under the definition of essential employees, which of course our lab-based employees are,
Mm-hmm.
I am not technically considered an essential employee. But certainly when there were several people coming back into the lab, I felt it was important to have at least one member of the management team here to support them. And so that's the policy we've adopted.
Yeah. We worked with a lot of different companies on figuring out early days when the governor was doing almost daily executive orders on who was essential, who was not essential, how you got your people in, and, you know, and everyone in companies like Alexandria worked very closely, which was fantastic, with all of their companies to make sure everyone felt not only comfortable, but we're also abiding by the spirit and the letter of the executive orders, which was good.
What were some of the other things?
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, again, everybody, I'm sure on this call, understands that transportation is really just a huge issue. And so that was something we grappled with early on. And actually, we ultimately decided to lease buses. So we now have 2 Calliope buses. It's very cool. You know, they're full-size buses. They have Calliope in orange up there. And we have one from New Jersey and one that covers the Manhattan and Brooklyn, Queens kind of route. And so that was a way we felt we could, you know, get our employees to work safely. We have the same bus driver. It's a dedicated bus. It's cleaned every night. They practice social distancing on the bus. We're hopeful that some other members of ARE will be interested in riding the bus as well, because it's not cheap.
Yes.
But again, safety was prioritized over all else. And we felt it was important to get our employees back to work safely.
Yeah. What are some of the other things that you did to kind of, you know, keep the team together and keep the culture together?
Yeah, so during the initial work from home period, we started with what we call the Calliope Daily. And Ben Vandergraaf, who's our head of people here, I think it was his idea. And essentially it was like a little newsletter, and included fun facts about some of our employees. People sent in pictures of their dogs, pictures of themselves exercising. So just really sharing experiences during COVID. And I think that was a great way I think everyone looked forward to receiving it. And it was a great way to keep us connected when everybody was working from home, and then for a couple months afterwards. And of course, we did happy hours. And again, Ben figured out this feature on Zoom where you can actually break out into small groups. And so otherwise it was unmanageable. So we broke out into groups of 5 or 6 people, and that works extremely well also. We sent out a weekly newsletter with updates on the science. I felt it was very important for everyone to understand that the science was progressing despite COVID. And so those are some of the things we implemented to kind of keep the engagement. I think we're all very anxious, as I'm sure you all are, for our first in-person everybody happy hour.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everybody looks forward to whenever we can do that again. So last week we had Lori Halloran and Craig Lipset on talking about the future of clinical trials and what COVID has done to impact them. Has this impacted your planning at all for, how to go into the clinic or what your trial is going to look like?
It actually has not. So we were actually lucky that we weren't in the clinic when all of this hit. Yeah. And the planning has been right on track. I think we may have lost a week or two for some reason, but that's it. Also, the clinical trials for our lead indication are extremely straightforward. The studies we're planning in normal human volunteers. So we actually don't anticipate any issues whatsoever.
Okay.
So we've been very fortunate in that regard.
So there's a few questions here which are pretty good. One of them is, on the opportunities to partner with big pharma, and you guys had done a deal with Novo Nordisk a little while back. So can you talk a little bit about how you think about partnering either with big pharma or other companies, and really where it fits strategically into how you're thinking about the company now?
Sure. So as I mentioned, in order to fully leverage the value of the platform that we've built and the broad disease areas that are associated with the gut-brain axis, partnerships are critical. And that's not only on the platform, but also on our individual programs. So as you mentioned, we did do a deal with Novo early on peptide therapeutics for metabolism. So it was early stage collaboration. We just actually renewed it for another 3 years.
That's great.
And they were my partner of choice, frankly, because their commitment to obesity and diabetes, is really second to none.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And we weren't working on peptide therapeutics, so it allowed us really to monetize the peptide portion of our platform. In terms of partnerships going forward, we are interested in partnerships that will really bring some value to the table in terms of either increasing the probability of success of our programs, increasing the speed at which we can move. So I would say we have a high bar for partnership, but at the same time, we're very excited about partnering with the right company, and a company that's really committed to whatever space we're talking about, that we believe, again, have the capabilities, the expertise to really help take that program to the next level in a way that we can't do on our own.
Yeah. And you've done
manufacturing would be an issue too, with such a large population to potentially help.
Yes. We're also thinking very hard about, fully leveraging the value of the platform that we've built. And so that is something that's really front and center for us right now.
Well, one of the nice things is that you've taken one of the challenges of being a platform company out, and that you've developed your own pipeline, right? There's usually this existential crisis early on of, if you are going to have this platform, how do you do partnerships if you don't actually have your own drugs or your own therapeutics? Because how do you actually prove to people that you can do what you say you're going to do? And in a lot of platform companies, people try to get either discovery deals done early, and there's a challenge over, can you extract value out of those? But you've placed yourself in a really good position of having your own clinical candidates and now being able to put them into the clinic yourself. So from a transactional standpoint, you've put yourself in a real, area of strength. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I think once we're in the clinic, my hope is that we can continue to be able to tell a very strong story around how the platform increases the probability of success and the speed of our programs. You know, I'm very proud of the company, given that we started 5 years ago, essentially from scratch, and yet have this pretty broad portfolio of programs. So, so that we are planning to continue to invest in the platform. I mean, technology, I'm sure everybody on this call is aware, I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to be in our industry because of the technological advances that allow us to do things like we're doing at Calliope that allow for insights into the biology and for us to do things in a fundamentally new way. And so we feel that investment in the platform, we continue to invest there, and our board has been, and investors have been very supportive because they really share the vision for the company.
We actually had an audience question. I'm going to state it a little bit more broadly about your IP process and how you're thinking about IP for the platform versus your therapeutics.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and something we think about all the time. At this point with our platform, we've really chosen to keep the elements of the platform as trade secrets, those are which are proprietary, and obviously composition of matter is key for us in our programs.
Sure. Yeah. There's another question about the role of the microbiome, and as a gut-brain axis company, you are specifically not necessarily a microbiome company, but I imagine that you get this question a lot. And how do you think about both the microbiome as a field and how it may impact the types of things that you are putting into patients?
So yes, we are not a microbiome company, because I do get asked that all the time. We are not. Sure. However, our platform is very enabling of microbiome research. And so a very simplistic example is some of the interesting metabolites that come out of microbiome research. Often there may be a link to disease, but mechanistically it's not well understood. So our platform really enables us to kind of connect the dots between the metabolite and the physiology. So we do follow that space very, very closely for that reason. As far as where I see the field going, I moderated a panel, actually, I think it was last year, on the microbiome, and had a terrific set of panelists. And I think the overall conclusion from the panel was that the microbiome is important, and that I think everyone believes that in some way being able to harness that biology will be therapeutically beneficial. But again, it's similar, I would say it's even 5 or 10 years earlier than the gut-brain axis in terms of the understanding of the actual biology at a mechanistic level. Yeah. So again, the overall conclusion from that panel, and I think the sentiment of many in the field, is that we just need a much better mechanistic understanding in order to truly harness it for the discovery of therapeutics. Yep. Having said that, there are, I think, upwards of 50 microbiome companies. And so I fully expect that some of those will be successful. So I'm optimistic about the field. And I think it's one to really watch.
Yeah. Are we getting to the point, do you think, where we can actually learn something about the patient we're trying to treat from the makeup of their microbiome? We may not be there yet, but do you think that can impact things? There was a publication last year about the composition of the microbiome and cancer progression or susceptibility to one of the immunotherapies. Do you think we're getting to the point where that can be used as, even if it's not harnessing it for therapeutic reasons, do you think we could harness it as a viable biomarker for how we think that patient will react to an ingested therapy?
Yeah, I don't know that much about this space, but certainly I think it's clear that the way samples are being collected now, that there are differences in different disease states. Mm-hmm. So that would suggest that, ultimately, once we understand that could be helpful information. Microbiome is exceedingly complex, and whether or not just a stool sample or the way it's being collected now is going to be adequate to have a good understanding of what's going on, I think is not entirely clear. But that's with the caveat that it's not an area I know very much about at all.
Okay. Well, let's change gears then. We just got a question on how do you target the enteric nervous system. So let's get away from the microbiome and let's talk about nerves.
Yeah, so we're just starting our initiative on the enteric nervous system. And this is often referred to as a second brain, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a piece, for example, of our platform that wasn't in the initial vision for the company. But what's been really cool about the single cell sequencing, and as we get more data sets, it's so clear that there's just so much signaling between all of these tissues, right? So between the enteric nervous system, the gut epithelium, the immune cells, the vagus, all of these cell types are communicating with each other. And so that's why we embarked on the study of the enteric nervous system. And we are thinking hard about both the enteric nervous system and the vagus, how we can extend our gut-restricted chemistry platform to basically target those areas as well, with compounds that are readily metabolized or whatever they may be. Right now, we're really sticking to our core of very low systemic bioavailability to improve safety.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how we're going after it. It's this is an incredibly interesting field in the sense that historically, people who study the enteric nervous system didn't necessarily talk to the people who studied enteroendocrine cells in the gut, or the people who worked on the vagus. So
get out
the microbiome, immunology and inflammation.
I'm shocked to hear that.
So it's so important, I think, to bring all of these experts together to build what I hope ultimately will be a very comprehensive understanding of this system.
We had one other question, are you looking at Alzheimer's or dementia at all?
So we are not right now. Having said that, we are very interested in neuroinflammation. And so we'll kind of see how that goes and what areas might be relevant for that particular effort.
I kind of want to spend another hour on your bus system and the transportation question of getting people from all over the place to East 29th Street. I think that's, I think that's remarkably innovative.
This is a shout out to the people on this Zoom meeting, that if you have any interest in learning more about the Calliope bus going to Alexandria, you know where to find me. We would be very excited.
If you're not careful, you're going to have a service business on your hand that's going to grow by leaps and bounds. You're going to have a lot of interest, I think. Well, it's one of
bus pass.
Well, like you said, it's one of the challenges, and I think something that New York is starting to get a little better at, right? We're now going to have multiple areas of New York that all have, little biotech clusters popping up in them. Yeah. And it's interesting from a regional perspective to think about, when you're coming from New Jersey, is it easier to get up by Columbia? Is it easier to get, down to Tribeca, or is it easier, to get across to Alexandria? Transportation intra New York City is actually a genuine issue that a lot of people think about.
No question. And we've been asked, would we consider moving, or should we think about moving? First of all, we love it here. Mm-hmm. And Alexandria, this isn't just for John's benefit, but I always say what a great partner they've been in accommodating our growth and working with us to grow within the complex, and all of the other benefits here. We're very happy here. We also feel like being in New York City is just core to who we are. And so we really do need to solve the transportation problem.
Yeah.
We've been, as an industry, we've made great strides on space over the past 5 to 10 years within the city, and even in Westchester and Long Island. But you're right, transportation remains an issue, which was only highlighted, right, with the risks or potential risks of being crammed together in subway cars during a pandemic.
That is exactly right. Yes, correct.
Yeah, we're very good at building the space, and now we have to work on better getting people to the spaces. All right, so we're down to 5 minutes, and I would say if you project out, I ask people usually to project out 6 months, but for you that's not really fair because you know what's going to happen for you in the next 6 months of your programs and things. So in 5 years, what do you want Calliope to look like?
Our goal is to really be a fully integrated biotech company. We do a lot of outsourcing, but we have a lot of internal work. And the platform technology that we have, I just think that it would be very, very, very difficult to reproduce elsewhere. So we'll never become the type of company that is all virtual, for sure. Having internal drug discovery capabilities is just incredibly enabling for us. We can turn experiments around on a dime. And so, we intend to continue to, build internally as we are leveraging the outside world, and maintain a commitment to working in multiple disease areas to work towards this goal of kind of dominating in the gut-brain axis space. If somebody wants to work on the gut-brain axis, they should come and talk to us. So as far as external partners, so we really have a vision to make a profound impact on human health by moving multiple important programs forward in parallel. And I think we're very well poised to be able to do that.
There is no better way to end this than on that statement.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being our guest today. It was fantastic. I learned a lot and I had an enjoyable time doing it. And I know our audience did as well.
Yeah,
Very
Nancy,
good.
thank you so
great.
much.
All right. Have a good day.
Right. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to NewYorkBIO's virtual breakfast series. Join us every Tuesday at 9 a.m. for more discussions with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. For more information on NewYorkBIO, please visit us at www.newyorkbio.org.